Right. All right, everybody. I'm just connecting all the things. How is everyone doing today? If you're here, make sure to say hello. And today we are hanging out with Nicholas Pearson. And we're a little bit late because we got a little chatty, so forgive us. But it was really good chat and it needed to happen. So that's that. So, I know you'll forgive us. I am, hold on, I'm just trying to get my thing going here. This Instagram just sometimes it like doesn't want to start for you. It's just kind of like, hi, yeah, we'll think about it. We'll see what happens.
Mm.
So, whatever. If not, it's on all the other things that we have. So Nicholas, you're a busy bee. You are a busy bee. Lots of new things brewing, which is super exciting for you. And I love watching that. And you've had a lot of performances lately too.
Yeah, so I kind of did something uncharacteristic this last year, and I decided to do something just for fun, and that was music. I actually kind of found my way into earth science because of music. I went to school on a music scholarship to study music education,
Mhm.
and a large portion of my life was devoted to that. It turns out that it's not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Being qualified pretty much only to be a high school band director from now until the end of time sounded miserable. And it was while I was pursuing music that I was, according to the paperwork, randomly assigned to work at the Earth Science Museum on campus, home to this fabulous collection of rocks and minerals. That I decided, hey, maybe I want to do something like this with the rest of
Yeah.
my life. And how I had that structured then is not how it's played out. But it was a really great chance to kind of get into the science side of crystals.
Right.
And after
I
many
love that.
years, yeah, after many years, I did other stuff. And last year, when Crystal Basics Pocket Encyclopedia came out, I had the other half of my advance, and I was like, I'm gonna buy myself a new instrument, an old instrument actually, because I've always loved historically informed performance. And there's like this really kind of niche school of horn playing in France that I've just always had a soft spot for, but never had a chance to do anything with. And that I'm a grown up now, as they say, and can make my own decisions. That was what
We
I did.
pretend to be anyway.
Yeah.
So we can
So
say that.
exactly. So that just kind of propelled me back into the musical scene, and it's nice to do something that isn't work related. Uh,
Yes.
it is a lot of work, but it is a different kind of work, and just the fact that it can be my hobby, my passion, versus having to monetize it. That's really nice.
Yeah, I love that. And then it's just even too, you have this a whole other community now that you're working with, right? And that's awesome too. Because we get so stuck in our little, work community, our little side things and whatever. So now that's like a whole new thing, and a whole new group of people too. And that's cool too. And I love that. My youngest sister, she played the horn for a long time and she was in the band. She did the French horn and she was in the marching band and she did all the things and she absolutely loved it. And so I always have a soft spot when I'm like saying, like, oh, yeah, that's right. Because I would always watch all the things that she did. It was always so cool. But I love that. So that's so interesting too, though, that was kind of your segue to crystals. Like that's so cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've been a rock collector for 30 years now. I mean, at that point in my life, it was about a decade I'd been collecting. I started teaching like classes on crystal energy and things when I was still in high school. The local metaphysical shop invited me to come and just share my, we'll call it expertise. I mean, at 18, you're not really an expert in anything, but people were generous with that title.
Yeah.
And I had a knack for tuning in, and I just absorbed all the info real rapidly. So when I got to enter those hallowed halls of the Gillespie Museum and play with this historic collection of rocks and minerals and have access to things that I could never have dreamed of, and in some cases couldn't pronounce. It
Right.
was just incredible. And
Um,
um, here I am. I'm still doing
it's
something with both of those topics, just in very different
yeah,
ways.
right, right. Like not how you like imagined or you didn't like know, but I love how it all just still intertwined the way it was supposed to. So that is like really, really cool. And you also, you're a crystal healer as well. I actually did the same course you did as well. And it was a wonderful course. I learned a lot from that. Um, so when like really like were you the kid that had like that paper thing with all the rocks stuck to it with the names on it? Like did you have those?
No, mostly because I couldn't. I like my heart ached to see them stuck on that little piece of cardstock. So I was a like dig them out of the local park or parking lot, or visit to the
Yeah.
beach or whatever. Bring rocks home with me, and then I remember when like those nature stores, that chain that died in the era of the mall glory days. When we got one of those in my hometown, once a month I'd go and beg my parents to let me use my spending money on rocks. And eventually we got a couple like little crystal shops in town, and I'd add things to my collection that way. But it just kind of started with whatever was accessible and available. And I just loved every part of it. I loved folklore. I loved the magic and the myth of it. I really enjoyed the earth science bits, at least, what I could digest at that age. And then, by the time I got to work in the museum, they realized I came in with more than just a small amount of information already. So within a few months, I had virtually unrestricted access to the collection.
Wow.
And I got to help design new exhibits and school programs and other things. And
Oh,
it's
wow.
real fun. I actually just went back to visit a couple weeks ago to pick up rocks I had on loan to the museum. Like some of the Nicholas Pearson collection was in the museum for, um, yeah, for 7 years. It was supposed to be like a semester or two long exhibit they did based on my first book, and they kept it up for 7 years. And finally, like they have like a new featured exhibition in that wing. So I got to come collect my rocks.
To get my rocks back, please. That's awesome. Oh my gosh. That must have been such a like surreal moment for you that, the place that you kind of were at that started at, and then, oh my God, here's my collection. So what was there? Like, what do you have back now? Are you like so excited to have them back? Like, do you have
I
to like
mean,
clear a new space for them or?
it wasn't a whole lot of anything. They used a lot of their own collection for it. So it was based on my book called The Seven Archetypal Stones. And there are seven rocks and minerals in the book: obsidian, jade, lapis lazuli, emerald, amethyst, quartz, and diamond. So I loan them, a few kind of like carvings or cultural examples of things, because they're more on the mineral specimen side. And then they got a couple new things for the collection to kind of make up for gaps that we had between us. But it kind of told the ethnographic stories behind these seven stones. They didn't lean so much into the woo and the magic and the metaphysics of it, but they definitely
Right.
embraced the folklore and history part. And it was really fun. Back in 2017, I think it was February 2017. So we're like right on the cusp of that 7th anniversary. We did a big
Yeah.
gallery opening for it, and I got to speak to dignitaries from the university and the local community and the college kids. And it was so surreal because I actually never finished my college degree. I left university running out of money before I could like actually get a piece of paper to hang on the wall, and just to have them
Right.
welcome
Right.
back was a huge deal.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's definitely something like to be proud of. Absolutely. That's awesome. I love that. So what was your like gateway crystal? Like what was the one, or was it even a rock even? Like or mineral? Like what was it that like you picked up and you were like, "Holy shit, this is magic."
Yeah, so I still have the exact specimen. It is in a, special place in my
Yes.
home.
Hmm.
It's behind glass. I mean, it's accessible, but it's front and center. And the
Yeah.
one glass display case I've got was a piece of quartz that my grandfather gave me when I was 8. So,
Oh,
30 years ago now, I always picked up rocks anyway. We'd go to the theme park or whatever, and you can, fill the little pouches full of tumbled
yeah,
stones, 40% of which are dyed. And
exactly.
after doing this enough times, he got me this piece of quartz, which at the time I didn't know, but now of course I can identify where it comes from, and it's from Hot Springs, Arkansas. It's got some iron hydroxide inclusions in it, and it's just a sweet little crystal. I mean, not too little, big when I was a small person, but these days my barometer of what large minerals are has changed for sure. But
Yes. Sense
that
makes sense.
that thing just ignited my curiosity in ways that I don't think anyone would have imagined. And it was like holding this piece of a fairy tale that had come to life. Like, here is this magical gem like you find in, all these myths and folklore. And it was just so wonderful. And, I've kept the wonder and curiosity alive ever since.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I love that. And I love that he gifted it to you too. So that makes it like that much more special for sure. I think, for me, like I had gotten like the one, the board with all the crystals and I took them all off because like it's like you were saying, I felt so bad they were stuck to it, and I was always talking to everything. Like I talk to everything, so I'd be like, just hold your breath. I'm gonna take you out. Like peel it off. Like it's okay, and when I was younger, I always was very drawn to Tiger's Eye. Like as a kid, like that one was always so fascinating to me. And it always just made me think of like dragons and there was some like power to it. And that was the one that I always had one with me. Unfortunately, I don't have the one because it was just like a little tumble, but I definitely know what you mean. Like there's just something about it. You're like, there's something here with this, and that's kind of like where I started as far as like just trying to collect all of the things. And I lived in Arizona for a while and we went to the petrified forest.
Oh, wow.
So that was really cool. I went with my Girl Scout troop. I'm a Girl Scout. And I just remember just the energy of that place, and I think that's what it was too. Is like, then you're like, all right, they're pretty and all that, but then wait a minute, there's this energy to them. So I just thought that was really cool. And so can you just talk a little bit about just the different energies of crystals and how that works?
Yeah. So, I think to have this conversation most effectively, we have to kind of address something we take for granted, which is like defining what energy is.
Mhm.
And I'm not a proper scientist. I never finished that trajectory in my life, but I like to use science as our way of understanding other things, at least metaphorically. And science has this deliciously vague definition of energy. Energy is merely the capacity to do work. So, heat is energy, light is energy.
Mhm.
Lots of things kind of fall under this category of energy. So, when we're talking about crystal energy, specifically, with our metaphysical hat on rather than our science hat on, we're
Yeah.
talking about a lot of overlapping phenomena. We're talking about things that maybe we can measure, things like electromagnetism, and we're talking about mostly things we can't measure, the subtle energies. And these kinds of energy fields, I think, can be best understood when we look at how the measurable stuff behaves. So when we map this out, where we look at those kind of sine wave graphs of energy phenomena of energy waves,
Right.
um, and we see a whole bunch of different things that can be extracted from that. So, we've got the frequency was the number of times that little S-shaped squiggle makes one turn in a given unit. So, for example, we measure sound and lots of other things in hertz. It's the number of cycles per second. And then you've also got amplitude. How tall or short are those squiggles? Do we have, a big, tall sideways S or a little teeny more conservative one. We can look at wavelength, the distance between any of two congruent points. And ultimately, if we use a metaphor, we're going to go back in time. I'm sure you're going to remember this era because I do. There was a time when radios had, well, first off, people used radios, right? And
Start there.
right. And if you don't know what that is, folks who are watching, go ask an elder millennial.
Just Google it.
And they had knobs on them. Nothing was a touch screen yet. And so we've got one knob that is the station. That's the actual frequency in megahertz. Those numbers that we see associated with our radio stations. Of course, now it's arbitrary because we stream them. But when they were broadcast solely on radio waves, it was the number of cycles, thousands of cycles per second in megahertz. And then the other knob that's really important if you want to hear your music is the volume. So frequency is the station, and the volume dial, therefore, is going to be our amplitude. And the thing about crystals, because they are so organized, all of their bits in them are packed into this really symmetrical, uniform shape. They produce very uniform kinds of energy fields, which kind of cut through the white noise of our existence. And that means that they have a higher amplitude, or like a louder volume, than most of the things that we're going to encounter in life. And so they can teach us by being loud enough for us to hear them, using this metaphor of sound. They can teach us how to kind of attune ourselves to that pitch, that wavelength, that rhythm or cycle. And so we benefit from their regularity, from their projection, from their constancy, by learning how to be a little bit more like them on every way.
Right. No, I love that. And so if somebody is really new to crystals, and they aren't sure like how to connect to the energy of a crystal that they find that seem to really kind of jump out at them, what's the easiest way to do that? What's a quick way to kind of start to learn how to tap into that energy?
I mean, first and foremost, we are all wired differently. We're all going to perceive things differently. There's no right or wrong way to perceive crystal energy. Sometimes you're going to get that kind of tangible corporeal sensation. Sometimes you're going to see colors. Other times you might hear a disembodied voice, but most of the time you're not going to get any of that stuff, and there's nothing wrong with you. So we can absolutely take advantage of a crystal's energy passively, wearing it as jewelry, as I'm doing. You can have them on the desk, stick them in your pocket, wherever else is going to feel nice. But we also have some more active ways that we can tap into that. My favorite thing for beginners to do to learn how to perceive crystal energy is I teach them a little exercise that I hesitate to even call it an exercise because that sounds like work. But the homework assignment is pick a rock, find good lighting, and ooh and ah over this rock. And just inspect it from every angle, hold it up to the light, feel all the surfaces with your fingers, as long as you won't break the crystal or cut yourself. If, in some cases when you tap them, they might feel resonant or kind of singing to, ringing quality. Other ones will feel like a dull thud. And just feel the heft. Use all the safe sensory input that you can. Please don't lick your rocks. I would think I shouldn't have to say that, but in fact,
should be a T-shirt. Don't lick your rocks.
And I say that as someone coming from the earth science field, where we absolutely lick rocks all the time, but it's
wait a minute. I know it's
calculated risk. I lick this white crumbly thing going, I'm 98% certain after everything else that this is halite, and I have no other way to confirm this. And then I go, yeah, that was halite. It's rock salt.
Right.
But it's those 2 times out of 100 when you're wrong and you're like, oh, this is a borate mineral, and this particular borate mineral from some locations often has, arsenic in it. So
say that too. I'm like, I just licked arsenic. Cool.
Yeah. It's only happened once. There's also only one time I accidentally found some uranium, or
that's the one time.
Just the one time.
Lick. No, it was fine. My ear was glowing for a little bit. It was okay.
But as we use our senses, we get this really kind of intimate connection to crystals. And then the next step is to become aware of what shifts within us when we hold, this crystal versus this crystal. where do we feel that in our body? How does our mind seem to respond to it? Um, and if you consciously connect to the energy, if you just say, hey, if the energy of this crystal had a color, what would its color be? If it had a sound, if it had a scent, if it had a taste, and then instead of using the external senses, we're using our subtle or psychic senses. And even if you don't find yourself, if you don't consider yourself super psychic, just go through it as a mental exercise and
Right.
see what happens. And you might be pleasantly surprised to know that, you know, at least for you, every time you pick up a piece of chrysocolla, you sense its color is bright red. Maybe nobody else does,
Uh-huh.
and you're not wrong. That's just how that energy is showing up for you. And the more we do these kinds of exercises and take the self inventory, and then consciously, kind of take that inventory of how that crystal energy shows up for us on an intellectual kind of level, then we
Mhm.
start to build this lexicon of what crystal energy is at large. And then we can
Yeah.
become more aware. You pick up a piece of amber for the first time and you start to notice those subtle changes in you. And they're just that, they're subtle. They're not very big
Right.
for most of us, at least. And
Yeah.
we just have to learn to kind of give us that laser-like focus on just the information that matters, because your mind is always doing a lot. Your brain has a lot of functions that it's in charge
Right.
of. So we just have to kind of shift the dial. We have to, tune the radio to just the frequency the crystal's on.
Right. No, I love that. And I think too, it's really important how you really are focusing on the present moment. Like everything you said is like bringing you, how does it feel to you right now? How does it, it's not, how's it supposed to? What did that person on TikTok said it's supposed to do this and that, and then that, that brings you to Moldavite. Oh my God, what's going to happen? And that was such a COVID thing. That was
Right.
like, it really was. And it's so funny because, I've even had people be like, oh, well, I bought this and I don't know, nothing really happened. And I wear it and I work with it. Like I actually have a piece here that I use, and Jay's got a ginormous, huge one. And for him, like he loves it. Like he loves the energy of it. I mean, our rockets shooting out of his head. Not at the moment, not that I can see anyway. But I think too, it's really important, like you said, is to really focus on how it feels for you. And just because this chart said that, when you pick up fluorite, you're gonna feel this way, and you pick it up and you feel a completely different way, doesn't mean you're wrong. So it's just that trusting your intuition. And by doing this exercise that you mentioned too, or homework, I think it's also that building your intuition. That's a really great intuition building exercise as well. And I love that. I love that. And it's easy. It's not something that you need to like go out and do. And literally, you can go outside and just pick up a rock outside that you find and do it with that if you want.
Yeah, and this ongoing conversation in the world at large about Moldavite brings up a couple of really good points when it comes to, I would say, spirituality at large, but
Mm-hmm.
especially when we're working with crystals. And the first conversation to be had is like the notion of correlation versus causation. It only took a few viral experiences on TikTok for people to be terrified of Moldavite because someone bought a piece of Moldavite and their dog ran away, or their
Right.
lover dumped them, or their parents died in a tragic car accident. You hear
Exactly.
all these larger than life stories, but two things that happen in sequence aren't necessarily related.
Mm-hmm.
I am wearing a hoodie and the sun is shining. Did wearing the hoodie make the sun shine? No, they just happened in sequence. And
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing that we really have to like look for, the causal level relationship. Are these dominoes that are knocking the next one down in a sequence of events, or are they just things that happen? And
Right.
most of the time it's things that just happen. And the reason for that is because people aren't building active, conscientious relationships with their stones. An
Mm-hmm.
analogy I'll often use for people who are concerned about, or say, hey, I got this and nothing happened. And I'll say, well, how did you work with it? How did you consciously invite its energy in your life? Like, well, I bought it as a ring and I've been wearing it ever since. Like, okay, how often are we cleansing that? How often are we, programming or charging that? And then people look at you like, oh no, there was more I was supposed to do.
Like, wait a minute.
And And the best analogy I can give people is like buying the fancy crystal is like buying the fancy gym membership. You actually have to go to the gym. Like
Right.
owning the membership doesn't change anything about your fitness journey. You got to go there and you got to put in the effort. And it's hard at first and you're not going to get very far, but you got
Right.
to keep with it to build that arc. So like Moldavite's not going to magically knock on your door and, fix everything or wreck everything as the case might be.
Right.
And you got to put in the work. And when we see that so many people have such different experiences with the same crystal, it also leads us to this notion of like, are we end result oriented, or are we focusing on the process? And this is something that comes up when we look at like, you pick 10 crystal books
Mhm.
and you read about sodalite in each one, and you're going to read a different description in each one. Hopefully you see some trends emerge. I would
Right.
like,
Right.
you probably
You would
would,
hope.
especially if you're a critical reader. But there's always going to be outliers. There's always going to be something that one person says that nobody else agrees with.
Mhm.
And part of the reason for this is we're all different people, and we're probably not holding the exact same specimen of sodalite. Like the authors didn't like rent it from one another and pass it around. Like they all had
Right.
their own.
Right.
So there are going to be variations there. But even if we're just looking at like the purest, most archetypal energy of sodalite, the same therapeutic mechanisms, the same energies, the same frequencies applied to a different set of life circumstances produce different end results. My
Mhm.
baggage is different to your baggage. We're not going to see the end result being identical, even
Right.
if the factors that drive the process are the same.
Right.
So we really have to look at this kind of threefold thing: correlation versus causation,
Mhm.
deepening our relationship, and thinking about the mechanisms underlying the process versus what happened at the end of the process.
Right. Right. And and I think too, it's also important to mention, a lot of people had, the Moldavite, just because that's the one everybody talked about. So that's why I'm picking on it. But a lot of times you don't know if they even had a authentic piece. And that's the thing too, is they're not showing you this piece that did all these things, and you don't know what the heck it is, so that's like where I'm like, all right, let me see what is this. I gotta see it, I want to see what it is. So I think that is also an important thing too, which leads me to my next question for you: is how can you like, what tips can you give a beginner on buying crystals and knowing that they are authentic, and then also buying from places that are, what's the word? Buying them.
Responsibly, ethically.
Yes, that's the word. Yeah, like in a good faith. In good faith. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it's complicated because
Mhm.
the tests one might perform on a piece of citrine do not resemble the tests that you're going to perform on a piece of amber. And those are not the same that you're going to perform on a piece of pyrite or moldavite. So when it comes to like just knowing whether or not something is real when you're inexperienced, the best advice I can give you is not a series of if-then statements with different goalposts for every mineral species. It's
Mhm.
actually know your sources. Ask meaningful questions. Ask them in good faith as well. I
Mhm.
have a day job where I work in an occult and metaphysical bookstore, and we sell tons of crystals. And the number of times someone will walk in and go, "Are your crystals ethically sourced?" is few and far between, but they're already prepared to not listen to your answer
Right.
because there's nothing you can say. You could even say yes, and they wouldn't believe you because they're
Right.
programmed for it. So it's asking the right question. It's like, hey, I'm really interested in short supply chains or rocks that come from places that treat their people well, or other stuff. And it's the same with are all your crystals real? Well, yes, except for goldstone and opalite, because those are synthetic materials, and we only sell them because people ask for them, and
Right.
otherwise
Right.
there'd be no point.
They're just
Uh,
pretty.
Right.
That's
You make
it.
people happy, so there's nothing wrong with that. But it's about
Right.
disclosure, and being able to have conversations with people instead of demanding a simple answer that's going to absolve you of responsibility in this is the way to go. So just find people you can trust, find stores that you can trust, find people who will have difficult conversations with you.
Mhm.
Um, And that is because the topics are difficult, not because your questions are difficult. Those are two different things.
That's
Um,
very different things.
right. So, and be willing to be wrong. Even to this day, I am still very willing to be wrong. Now, there's a lot of stuff I'm not wrong about, but that's because I've learned the hard way.
Right.
Sometimes by being wrong before, and other times by just doing all my due diligence. But I learn new stuff all the time. When I was writing this book, I discovered that one of my favorite minerals had its formula redefined, and I was wrong. And it's wrong in my previous publications because just
Okay.
in the span of time between those books coming out, the International Mineralogical Association changed the definition of this. So, the,
Pluto. They decided it wasn't a planet all of a sudden.
right, yeah. So, you know, when we have the best and most up-to-date information in front of us, we're probably predisposed to doing the best we can. So, when we know better, we do better. And I think that's also true of our sources. Just because you're buying crystals from a shop that can't give you all of the ideal answers to these hard-hitting questions doesn't mean that they're not buying in good faith themselves. It means that they just maybe haven't had these conversations or don't have access to the kinds of things you're looking for. But I think generally most metaphysical retailers, especially the ones who are in it because it is their love and not just because money is their love,
Right.
they really are trying to do right. So just have the conversation. Ask, hey, I'm looking for an untreated piece of citrine. Is that something that you carry?
Right.
And if they say, actually, all of our stuff is heat treated, it doesn't mean every crystal that they sell is bad. It just means they don't have non-heat treated citrine.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
we gotta use good critical thinking skills, but we also have to be empathetic human beings, understanding that we're all subject to the same isms like capitalism and consumerism, that unfortunately it keeps their business open to serve you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really important. And that kind of goes across the board too. It's just have manners, like, be nice and don't come in like, oh well, I have my list, like, and this is, if it didn't come, if it's not this and this, then there's something wrong with this shop and I'm gonna write a review and all of these things without even giving them a minute, because somebody, maybe their focus in a particular store is, maybe they're really focused on tarot and they get crystals because people want them, but maybe they, and maybe by talking to them and asking them those questions, they may be like, you know what, maybe I need to dig into this little, maybe I need to know a little more about my product. And, in a way that could be helpful, instead of just charging in there like a bull, and then all of a sudden then they're feeling some sort of way, and you probably aren't going to have a crystal because you're being a jerk. So all these crystals are like, see you later. But no, I think it is important that when to really just think about what you're saying before you say it, and what are the answers that you're actually looking for. Like,
Right.
are you going in to accuse somebody of something, or are you going in because you really want to know?
Right.
And I think it's
And,
important.
and if you genuinely want to know, those folks genuinely want to teach you. They want to share with you. They want to tell you what they're able to.
Mm-hmm.
And finding those folks who genuinely want to teach you things is a sign that you're in the right place. It
Absolutely.
might not mean that you leave with what you're looking for, but you're going to leave with something meaningful. And when you're a beginner, that is like the best feeling in the world, to know that someone's got your back.
Right. And even if they don't know, or they don't know enough about it, there, maybe they'll be like, listen, I'm going to research a little and I'll get back to you. And you're building that relationship with them, which is great. But then it's also that, like, yeah, I don't know everything, but I'm willing to take some time out because you asked nicely, to try to help you and figure it out. And I think that also, it's just, again, it's like a part of that whole process of that energetic exchange. And you know what, okay, we can do this, like, we can figure it out. And then that person, everybody's learning something in the process, and that's never a bad thing.
Absolutely.
Never, never, never. So tell me about your book, Crystal Basics. What did you just decide, like, oh, I think I need to write a Crystal Basics book? Like, how is this whole process? How did that go?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of funny because my first book right out the gate is dense and like a deep esoteric dive into just seven stones. It's like 90,000 words about seven stones. That's a
Yeah,
lot to say about each one. And
that's a lot.
and then I followed that up with, really kind of specialized topics. repeatedly about crystals. And finally, when it was time for my sixth book to come out, when I was ready to sit down and write my sixth book, I think is a better way to put it, I thought, I've really refined how I approach things for beginners, and I would love to have all of the questions that they've got answered in one place reasonably, all the ones I can fit between two covers,
Right.
and put a little bit of an encyclopedia in there that's got more coverage than any of my other books, and
Mhm.
hopefully get some new things, and just kind of put all the hands-on stuff and some good reference sections. And so my publisher loved the idea, and I came out with my first like proper beginner's guide in 2020, and it was my sixth book.
Mhm.
So it did really well. I think part of the reason it did really well is that there's a lot of fairly intermediate and advanced material in it, but it's got basics in the title. So we all start from the same point and then grow together throughout it.
Yeah.
After seeing how well that did, I started looking at kind of like parts of the crystal book market that maybe were underrepresented, or things that
Mhm.
I'd never really thought about doing myself. And there was one particular piece of feedback that I'd gotten more than once on Crystal Basics, just so people can see, it's this
Yeah.
big giant honker here.
Right,
Um,
right.
and it was that it was not portable. They loved the concept, but it was just not portable. So I thought, well, how about a mini version of it?
Yeah.
And, I kind of toyed with that. I had no intention of writing a little, travel friendly pocket encyclopedia. But I thought, I'm between other projects, and I think I could do this quickly. And it's the kind of thing, like, if someone's going to have that little pocket sized portable reference, why not have the Nicholas Pearson version of that? Because the ones that are out there, I'm dissatisfied with for, various and sundry reasons. It doesn't mean they're not good resources, just that there were bullet points they weren't hitting.
Yeah.
So that's how Crystal Basics Pocket Encyclopedia was born, and true to form, it delivers. It is pocket sized. If you have
So
generously sized
cool.
pockets, it'll fit in them. Um, but I managed to do uh, 2.5 times as many rocks in this versus this. So it's got, I guess it's 2.25, but
Mhm.
quite a lot more rocks fit into it. And then necessarily the how-to section of it is a lot shorter. But then in the back, I tried to compensate by having glossaries of treated and artificial, misnamed or mistaken identity trade names. There's a glossary of metaphysical terms for people who are like just really starting out in the kind of spiritual spaces, and you've got reference tables
Yeah.
for like birthstones and planetary correspondences, elements, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I love that because like you said, when with the other smaller books, I always found that I needed more than one because the couple that I had that aren't yours, I would look in one, but I knew the information, like part of the information would be in that one, but then I'd have to go to another one because part of the information would be in that one. And what's the point of having these little books if you have to carry them all with you? So
Right.
I like that you just kind of like took it all and just like whoop, right together. So it was definitely super handy. And I actually have mine on my iPad, so I can. But you have them just all listed out so nicely. And how do you choose what crystals you're gonna put in? Like, how do you do that? Like, that seems so overwhelming.
It is like just full stop. It is for the big
Yeah.
one that came out. My original proposal had like 120 stones, and then that rapidly grew, and so I kept trying to shrink it. So it'd get like up to 167. I'd be like, well, so we'll do 150. We'll cut out 17, and then I'd like 25 more, and I'm like, okay, so we're gonna aim for 200, and that's eventually where we settled. Um,
Right.
but for the Pocket Encyclopedia, the proposal kind of got batted around in a couple different ways. First it was, well, we could just extract the 200 stones from the big Crystal Basics and turn it into like a really, really slim pocket encyclopedia.
Hmm.
Um, then, maybe do, the Crystal Basics Pocket Encyclopedia for love crystals and healing crystals. But then it was going to be a lot of the same crystals in each one. So I scrapped that
Yeah.
real fast. And then then I decided, well, let's just do one and let's cram as many rocks as we can. 450 seemed like it was going to fit our size and price requirements. I had two guiding lights, two books that I know perform really well in the market that people love. I wanted it to feel like it served both of them or exceeded the expectations in both of those. So one is Judy Hall's The Crystal Bible.
Yes.
It has about 200 crystals in it.
Okay.
So I wanted it to be a smaller trim size and a lower price point than Judy's book.
Right.
Uh, and then the other one that's really popular is the Pocket Book of Stones by Robert Simmons. And
Yes.
my goal for that was to have clearer images and more rocks than that had. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
able to compete with a price point, but I satisfied both of those things. So, under this, over this, and I found
Right.
that sweet spot. But it meant revising the list of crystals inside over and over and
Oh my
over
God.
again. I have, I don't know, probably about 30 or so that are written up that I
Hmm.
took out to make room for others. And it was even down to like when we started the manuscript review process. So like I've already submitted the book.
Hmm.
There were three stones very late in the game that it was like, hey, I would like to add these three stones, which means I have to subtract three.
Right.
Do you trust me to do this now? Is it too late? And they made it happen. And part of that was responding to needs in the market. Like, hey, this is a new material, like blue rose quartz. People just like
Okay.
lost their mind over it. Like, it's not really blue rose quartz. Well, it's not really blue. Like, let's step back and have a conversation about optics and physics.
Right.
But you know, so I really wanted to get at that in there because it wasn't in anything. And there were a couple others that I added pretty last minute, but not all 200 stones from this carried over. I
Hmm.
had to cut a few. Um, I wanted to make sure there were common rocks. So we've got granite and marble and slate and chalk and flint and quartzite and a bunch of other things
Right.
because I don't feel to be effective crystal healers and crystal witches, we need to participate in consumerism. You can absolutely check out the rocks that are in your local landscape and harness the magic they've got. So I wanted
Yeah.
to include as many of those as possible
Right.
within reason. And then I needed to make sure that fan favorites were in there,
Hmm.
as well as some things that are in purely because they excite me.
Hmm.
So my Preseli Bluestone has to be in there from the Welsh hills of Pembrokeshire. I needed to have cadmium smithsonite with its bright yellow shades because I got a piece on my first trip to England and it comes from Ireland, and I wanted an Irish mineral in there just for the
Right.
sake of it. And there are a couple other things that they're just fun exercises for me, but you can find them. I mean, they exist.
Hmm.
So it was a mixture of all those criteria, and that made it a challenge, but I think it was a really fun challenge.
Right. Yeah. Like just trying to find that. And, did you feel too like some were like, yes, I definitely need to be in there. And then some were just kind of like, yeah, whatever. I don't care. Because I kind of feel like that's how it'd be. Like you're having a conversation with 200 different, crystal beings at this point.
Yeah. When it really came down to the wire, so I went from 200 maybe 250 in the initial draft. Like we'll expand it slightly but keep it like really slim, make it half this price point. And then it was like, well, I'd love to do different volumes, but we're not going to do volumes, that's not going to work out. So then my
Hmm.
list ballooned all of a sudden to 600 crystals, which was not happening. So
That's a lot. Right.
yeah, I had to cut down a quarter of them. If it were not full color, if there were no images, I could
Yeah.
easily have done 600 or more. But
Mhm.
the allure of a good crystal book is you can use it to help remember what your crystals are.
Right, right. Yeah, you gotta
So
use those images for sure.
some of the ones that didn't make the cut were because I wasn't excited about them because the market was not excited about them. I hate to say it, but like you got to follow the trends, and there are
Yes,
a
it's
couple of things
true.
that I wrote about in the Big Crystal Basics that I thought were going to be like super fun because when they made their debut in the market, people were really excited. And then I noticed that they really just sat on store shelves everywhere I went. So they came out to make space, and other things were just like I loved them, but they were far too obscure, or admittedly, sometimes I couldn't get a good enough image. Like I
Mhm.
could not afford to buy the one that was really photogenic, and I didn't want a terrible and grainy picture. My husband wouldn't have taken a terrible and grainy picture, but the rock itself might have been terrible and grainy. So those were all things that we had to consider, and at the end of the day, I needed it to be a wide cross section to serve the needs of a large audience
Mhm.
rather than just a select few. So there are rocks in here that the uber fans of rocks and minerals are going to go, oh, I've never heard of that. But there are also things that beginners are going to feel very comfortable and confident identifying because they're already in their wheelhouse.
Right, like I know this, I've heard of this. And also too, it's also your book isn't just being it's not just out in one state, you have all over the world. So then you have that expansiveness of that as well, and just covering all of that sort of, so that that's a lot. Like it's a very big responsibility, Nicholas. Jeez.
My secret wish is that it does so phenomenally well that I can
Mhm.
pitch a follow-up volume to it and do 450 more. That would be like the dream. And then there'll be 900 between the two. And I
Oh
think
my
I'm going to be good for a while after that.
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be very, very good. But I do, I like how you have it. I'm just looking down at like how you have it set up to, I just flipped on to moss agate, and you have the physical healing, the psychological healing, the spiritual healing, and then you have the formula, the hardness, the crystal system, the formation process, the chakra, and the correspondences, which I think is really cool to have in there as well. Especially for people who are really starting to work with those things, then they could be like, oh, hey, what is, even like we have this new moon come up, and what is it, Aquarius, I think. And it's like, oh, well, which one maybe works with that? So bringing those out and maybe working with those crystals on the new moon, like that's something you can do. And so it kind of gives, I like that it gives you those different options of how to use the crystal and what you can do with it. And then also too with the chakras, that's really important. And I do Reiki as well. And there's so just, I mean, crystals are color, based, and it's such an easy way to, give somebody advice on what chakra to work with. It's like, okay, well, here, use this crystal, keep this near you, keep that, and do that. So can you talk about chakras and crystals a little bit?
Sure. So I'm a little bit of a renegade in the crystal sphere about this because if we look at the development of the modern chakra system as we know it today, that sequence of colors from red to violet really was only selected in about 1977.
Hmm.
So before that, it was a different sequence of colors. It was actually multiple colors per chakra. They were based on traditional mandalas. But even in like Vedic texts, there's not a lot of agreement on how many chakras there are, in exactly in which places we find them, what they represent, what we should call them. So it takes kind of a long trajectory to get us to this modern chakra system. So we've been doing it that way for not very long, not quite 50 years. That doesn't
Right.
mean it's wrong. That doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means that we have, I think, our best estimate of human beings, hominids, intentionally collecting crystals, quartz crystals in particular, for what appear to be ritual uses, maybe as high as 450 million years. So, I'm sorry, 450,000 years. So almost a half a million years. 450,000 years of lots of ways, and then about 45 years of doing it one way.
Right.
So you have other options. The
Mhm.
other thing that I like to consider is that color represents a small fraction of crystal energy. It is absolutely a useful tool, and
Mhm.
you can use color correspondences. But if we start to think about the physics of that, the optics of that, when we look at a beautiful blue piece of turquoise, it's absorbing every color except turquoise, which means that like the stuff it's made out of is drawing in red and orange and yellow and so on and so forth, but it's
Right.
rejecting turquoise colored light. So is it really emblematic of the archetype of what that color represents, and therefore the chakra we're going to correspond it to? Maybe, maybe not. So color crystal chakra correspondences are kind of a novel thing, meaning, new thing in the grand scheme
Right.
of human history.
Right.
And I'm far more interested in asking the question, what is the primary mission of this crystal? And if I'm going to use the chakra system, which chakra does that mission align with the most? So sometimes the color correspondence works perfectly with that. And other times you come up with a rock like blue lace agate. When we start to look at the deeper things that it does, it invokes a sense of resiliency, of inner and outer strength, by helping us strip away the layers of the psyche and the ego that kind of accrete by accepting other people's ideas for us and about us.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, it helps us dig down to the underlying issue that creates all that stuff that gets in the way of our sense of personal power and personal agency. And if we think about it in that light, it's suddenly a solar plexus stone, even though it's blue. So yes, you can use the color correspondences. Yes, you can also just go, hey, you know what? I think shungite is the right stone for my throat chakra because it represents the goal I'm working on for my throat chakra, and use it that way.
Right. Right. No, I love that. And and again, I get it kind of leads into that, do what works best for you. And with the crystals too, like asking the crystals where can you help me the most, and all of that, and just again being aware and present. And I think when you are doing work on somebody else, and it's just being aware and present with them too. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about auras, and she was talking about, like forest green was really like out of her, the heart. And she's like, but it's supposed to be, pink, isn't it? And I'm like, no, if it's green. And now, and now that's kind of a weird thing that's changing, because now the heart can be pink and green.
Mhm.
And now they're even changing that in books and stuff, which is interesting to me. But I think that, it's definitely something to pay attention to. And like you said, if something doesn't correspond, like if with the chart that says it, that just not doubt your intuition and to go with that. And it's what everything comes down to, is trusting yourself, and trusting that crystal, that they know what they know what they got to do, right? They know what they got to do. So it's just that trust is important, I think.
It is, and asking the right questions.
Right.
The question is not necessarily, what crystal do I need for my heart chakra? The question
Mm-hmm.
is, what specific goal do I have in working with my heart chakra?
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, it does more than just one little narrow bandwidth of things, right?
Right.
It's got a lot of responsibilities. So which of those is your end goal, and what is your personal obstacle to achieving that goal? And if we
Right.
start thinking this way, then we start thinking about, what is the specific baggage maybe we're trying to release or heal or
Mm-hmm.
transform? How did it get there? And how do I imagine feeling once it's gone? And then we can go, oh, you know what crystal reminds me of exactly this journey? It's going to be malachite, or it's going to be emerald, or it's going to be ruby. And then you can kind of lean into what medicine that crystal has to offer for you, rather than just prescriptively going, well, the chart said aventurine is for the heart chakra.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, it is, but is it for your heart chakra?
Right. Right. No, and it's just so important, I think, to and that goes across the board, even like when, I'm doing tarot or whatever, and somebody asks me a question, does so and so love me? Like, cuz we're near Valentine's Day and all that. And it's one of those things, like, okay, but where's the why? Like, what the why of it? Like, let's never mind all that. And it's like, we'll get to that, but we need to kind of go through this first. So it is
Mhm.
that same type of idea. And, kind of rephrasing that question, and asking, like, okay, why do what do you want out of it? Where do you want to be at the end of this little journey that you're about to take? So I love that. No, that's so important. And so we're actually almost up to an hour already. Like, I don't know how that happened. But could you just tell everybody a little bit about, you do so many things, and you offer so many free things too online, which is awesome. where to find you, what you have going on, where to buy your stuff, all that.
Sure. So, if you're interested in learning more about the work that I do, I'm in most places at the Luminous Pearl. So it's theluminous.pearl.com and at the Luminous Pearl on all the social media.
Yeah.
I do a lot of live Q&A and other things on Instagram predominantly. And throughout the month, any given month, you'll find me teaching, oh gosh, maybe classes with the College of Psychic Studies online, hosted by the folks in London at the college. You'll see me doing a free monthly online Reiki share. Proceeds from that cover the cost of using that platform, as well as for supporting charitable donations. I teach a variety of other classes, some exclusively for my Patreon subscribers, some for the general public, and then sometimes you'll even find me like in person doing things. It's great that I can do that again. We can all do that again after the last
Yes.
years, which is exactly how we met.
Yeah, absolutely. We did. And then I got to see you again at Temple Fest. So that was awesome. Are you going to be up here this year?
I have not really fleshed out a calendar this year. So far, I'm still working on a couple of event submissions. I've decided to do less travel this year because I have a lot of writing due, and I'm
Right.
about to start editing my next book. Like, probably,
When you're
I,
done.
I suspect that I may be receiving an email from my editor before the end of this month, because we're going to be signing off and turning it into the printers come April, so it'll be ready for a January release. And this will be book number 9.
That's so awesome.
And it's still like the official name and title, not public yet, coming soon,
Yeah,
very
right.
soon. But I'm super excited for this one because it is my witchiest crystal book yet.
Ooh, I'm excited.
It's like the most magical. There's something in there for our healy feely metaphysical crowd as well. I didn't
Yeah.
write for only one or the other. We'll all find tools in there, and it's focused on topics of protection and psychic hygiene and banishing and binding and reversal, and all the heavy stuff that we don't often get out of crystal books.
Right.
I tried to have at least one example of all that stuff in there. So I'm really excited about it. I just got to see the proof of the cover, and pretty soon I'm going to be sharing the full cover and catalog copy with my Patreon crowd.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So if you guys want to see it first, I would hop on that Patreon and you'll see what's going on. That's exciting. Yay. Congratulations. I love it. I can't wait to see. That's so awesome. And also, too, if you have any of Nicholas's books, go ahead and leave a review for him. Takes just a couple minutes and it really helps out all authors out. It really makes a big difference. So please, please, please go ahead and do that. And you can always contact Nicholas at the Luminous Pearl if you have any questions about any of the stuff that he does. But his website is actually very, very nice. So you can find everything you need right on there. I'm like clicking on your, I'm like, oh, your website's really nice.
It took a paid professional. That's not my
Yeah,
job.
yeah,
That is,
okay.
yeah.
I'm still in the like, I could do this myself. And then I'm like, I hate life. And I'm just like trying to add like my tarot deck on there to sell it. And I'm just like, all of a sudden everything's upside down and sideways. And I'm like, I don't know what I just did. And I don't know how to fix it.
I feel
So
that.
that's probably in my future because I don't even know what it looks like right now. I'm like, it's when I just had to walk away from it because it wasn't going well. It wasn't good. But thank you for so much for coming on. Finally, I got you on. And then we'll have to chat again when your new book comes out.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and thanks for everyone who's watching.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And be sure if you have any questions or anything, you can put them in the comments. And if you watch the replay, let us know. All right, guys, you have a wonderful day.